Hi, I'm Rachel. Welcome to my channel, La Bricoleuse. I'd like to talk about the difference between a theatrical milliner and a contemporary milliner. What makes those two different jobs? They seem so similar. One makes hats for actors to wear in performance, and the other makes hats for customers with special occasions to attend. But it's not quite that simple.
I'm primarily a theatrical milliner, so let's start there.
A theatrical milliner makes the hats depicted in the costume design renderings. Those are just one component of the whole entire costume, which is one component of the whole entire costume design concept. There might be some accompanying research, especially for a historical hat design, fashion plates from the time period, or portraits. A contemporary milliner, sometimes called a model milliner or a bespoke milliner or a fashion milliner, that person often designs the hats that they then make or delegate to an assistant.
And similar to how a costume designer will design all of the costumes in an entire show, a fashion milliner will often design an entire seasonal collection with a mind to aesthetic cohesion.
It's not to say that you don't have any creative contribution or input. I've worked with some costume designers who deeply trust my experience with all the different materials that you use in making hats and defer to me to make millinery decisions or to suggest trim options. I've also worked with designers who wanted to pin out every flower on each hat that's designed for their show.
And much the same way that a costume designer comes up with hat designs with specific characters in mind, a fashion milliner creates the designs in their hat collection with ideal clients in mind.
A contemporary milliner's hats might be refurbished. That's more often blocked felt hats in the Western tradition. But most contemporary milliners make a hat with the idea that the customer will keep it as is and that it will never need to be resized or retrimmed. In theatrical millinery, it will behoove you if you create trim structures that can easily be moved around on the hat or reconfigured. Things change a lot in tech rehearsals. And sometimes something that looked great in the drawing on the page, you discover in the space that the way the lights are hung, you really need to
Move all of those flowers and feathers from one side of the hat to the other.
particularly in batch produced contemporary hats, glue and staples can be used to secure trim, hat bands, feathers, ornaments, to reduce the amount of time that is needed to produce something so that the wholesale price can be lower. In theatrical millinery, ideally, you don't use any glue. There's an exception to every rule, so certainly if something needs to get turned around really fast and hot glue's the only way you can do it, if at all possible, we don't use adhesives because we know that even if the hat stays trimmed this way for the duration of the run of the show, it has future lives in future shows when it may need to be refashioned and retrimmed. Adhesives are not conducive to that. They leave behind a residue, or you can't unglue something. In theatrical millinery, we do use sewing machines, if at all possible, to increase the speed of production. Because a stage hat is almost never seen closely by the audience, machine stitching, even if a show is set prior to the invention of the sewing machine, isn't really going to be noticed by even someone in the front row. We often need to produce something like 40 hats in 5 weeks. In contemporary millinery, hand sewing is a mark of quality. The more handwork goes into the construction of a hat, the higher the value of that hat, the higher the price point at which it's going to be sold. A fully hand sewn, one of a kind hat is a luxury piece of bespoke millinery. In theatrical millinery, your responsibility above all else is to serve the aesthetic vision of the costume designer and the show's director. You might suggest aesthetic choices that run counter to everything you know about sophisticated hat design because you have a character who is unsophisticated. They need a visual cue in the pedestrian trimming of their hat to let the audience know that they're a bumpkin, an ingenue, a child.
By the same token, you might be making a new hat for a character that, in the context of the show, has owned that hat for 20 or 30 years of their life. So after you make it, the hat will need to be weathered and aged and perhaps even painted.
You might be wondering, what qualifies me to make this video? I've worked in both areas as a theatrical milliner since 1994, and I've assisted in several workrooms of contemporary milliners. So I don't mean to suggest that a milliner can't move between the two areas. A contemporary milliner can certainly take a contract to produce hats for the stage, and a theatrical milliner can launch a collection of contemporary hat designs. This is the difference between these two areas, however. The goal of this video is to just make sure that you know what you're getting into and what the requirements are, whichever path you choose.